ये क्या हम सारे लोग क्यों दिवाली खत्म नहीं हुआ लोग का दो और आ रहे हैं खाली है तो सुबह लेक्चर था नहीं अच्छा अरे ऐसे सेंड रहेगा तो क्या पढ़ाऊं बाकी चैप्टर्स क्या है देन आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू टेक द मेन चैप्टर टुडे क्योंकि कोई मतलब ही नहीं है क्योंकि नर्वस सिस्टम हम लोग पढ़ रहे थे ना, नर्वस सिस्टम कहाँ तक कंप्लीट हुआ? टाइप्स ऑफ नर्व्स। आज 3 hours का लेक्चर था, पर आपको नहीं चलता है चैप्टर। अरे दिस गर्ल इज लुकिंग सो नाइस टुडे। हमेशा तुम लोगों को वही जीन्स और वो स्लैक्स और टी शर्ट में देख देख के फॉर चेंज की लुकिंग गुड ना। तुम लोग पहनते थे नहीं सलवार सूट? नहीं, ओकेजन्स में फेस्टिवल्स में पहनते हैं। देखो कितनी अच्छी लग रही है। ओके, तो ये ना I'm not going to continue with this chapter today. I'll have to take it at the full strength in the next lecture perhaps. आज क्यों absent है ये लोग? अभी कोई एग्जाम है? 3 लोग आए थे, हमने रोका था और फिर शायद भाग गए। हाँ, अभी उनका खत्म नहीं हुआ सेलिब्रेशन। तो we had reflex action also, I remember I did. नहीं? Reflex action, did we do? Yes. Reflex action we have finished. Structure of spinal cord we finished. Brain we finished. No. We were at nerves. We did 3 kinds of nerves. 3 kinds of nerves. Brain got ही है. नहीं, brain करना है. Brain करना है और नर्व्स करना है। यस, रिफ्लेक्स करना है कि रिफ्लेक्स हो गया था, हो गया रिफ्लेक्स हो गया। तो फ्रॉम दिस चैप्टर ओनली स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ ब्रेन इज रिमेनिंग, दैट इज व्हाट वी आर सेइंग। और सेंस ऑर्गन तो पूरा बाकी है। ठीक है, नाउ लेट अस गो टू द लास्ट सेक्शन ऑफ द चैप्टर, द लास्ट सेक्शन ऑफ योर सिलेबस। वी विल कंप्लीट at least 2-3 chapters. Let's see how much we can, because today we have a lot of time. ये पीछे के चैप्टर्स कंप्लीट कर लेते हैं and we'll revise the first part, nervous system. I'm going to revise and then solve it. I'll teach when the classes will, because that's a very important chapter. नहीं तो ये मुझे repeat करना पड़ेगा. So what are the rest of the chapters? Reproductive system के बाद से देखो, reproductive system के बाद से देखो, population. Population so population में look into that chapter. Few things I'm going to discuss only. Population वैसे भी it is just 2 marks, ना कुछ इतना objective आता है. सिर्फ हाँ 2 to 3 marks only, not much. So from this chapter, look into your textbook. Okay. So population में first part of the chapter is nothing there to study. What are you supposed to study is factors responsible for population explosion in India. Did you see those factors? Factors responsible for population explosion in India. In my textbook it says page 169. What is it? Check for yourself. So this points I want you to just go through. Confusion है तो पूछो, otherwise these points are very simple. I'll just run through in 2 minutes. There is nothing so difficult that you cannot understand, but still देखो अगर कुछ doubts है, कुछ पूछना है, go through these points. First is illiteracy, meaning what are you trying to study, what are you trying to understand from this topic? We are trying to understand why there is population explosion in India. India में population explosion, why is it? You understand the meaning, correct meaning of population explosion? What is the meaning of that? What is sudden increase? Sudden increase, meaning it is not at a stable rate. At a short period of time, the growth is too much. What are the reasons? Number 1 is illiteracy. So how can you relate illiteracy with population explosion? What is the relation? Illiteracy के साथ population explosion. What is the relation? What do you think? When we are not even aware, illiteracy here speaks about people not aware about the disadvantages of big families. If the family is a family of 3 or 4 members, that family can enjoy many different benefits. But if it is a family of 8 members, 12 members, obviously so many things they have to cut down. So people need to be aware. No, if we are aware, then obviously we will not try to increase our family. So that is the concept. Traditional beliefs. You understand what it's meaning here? What is the relationship? Why are we talking about these points under population explosion? Traditional beliefs, matlab? Still in certain parts of our country, there is a traditional belief that there should be a male child. And in the longing for a male child, many times, couples keep on trying for a child. And in that process, quite a number of times, 2, 3, 4 girls may happen, but still they would believe that they should have a male child, they should have a boy, they should have a male child. So, काफी बार in this process में the family size becomes big, no? So that is the mortality rate. Of course, not today. When we are talking about mortality rate here, generally means mortality rate referring to what? Improper medical health. Today, when we study the process, when we study the concept of reproductive system reproduction, then you will understand that whenever we are talking about critical cases during the process of conception and pregnancy, also today, all these things can be tackled. But if I talk about 2, 3 generations back, also, there used to be enough number of deaths of the mother and the child during the process of pregnancy. Okay, so today that is much lesser because there's so much of medical advancements. Today, a female with so many different type of complications also can give birth to a child. No? So that's the reason we are talking about mortality. The mortality here, majorly they are mentioning about the mortality of the child. Okay, and at the same time, mortality of the child is also because of mortality of the child is I'm sorry. Dekho, mortality of the child is also because of child marriages. No? If I again talk about 2, 3 generations back, 3, 4 generations back, what used to happen? If I talk about 2, 3 generations back also, if you talk about our grandmothers, no, our grandmothers used to get married at what age? At your age or much younger, when they were something around 8 years, 9 years, 10 years enough, they should get married. No? So today we are getting married, something around 27, 28, no, nobody thinks of marriage also no, at that time. So can you think of a marriage of a girl who is roughly around standard 7, standard 6, standard 7? So that is the time, and at that age, the internal body is also not so very mature. The reproductive system is also not very mature. So these girls at that particular age, they are getting married and they are forced to conceive. So obviously the reproductive system cannot carry on the process of conception for a complete period. No? And they generally also, you will hear even from our grandmothers that they may have given birth to 7 children and 3 may have 3 they may have aborted, 3 they may have had stillbirth. No, the stillbirth meaning during the pregnancy the child is dead. So that is it. So the family size was as it is big. At that time, women, you will never hear about giving birth to 1 or 2 children, or not less than 7 to 8, that way. So that is what we are talking about. Economic reasons. Economic reasons. What is the relation of economic reasons? Why? When we go 2 generations back, why the family size was so big? Today we have a family size of 3, at the most 4. Why 2 generations back? If you ask your grandfathers, even if you ask your fathers, they would be roughly around 3, 4 siblings. And if you talk about our grandparents, they are something around 12, 13 siblings. So why such a big family size? Okay, big family size, they would generally believe that more the number of male siblings, more the number of male children, they would be earners for the family. No, they would earn for the family, and the family would be in a good economic condition. So that was also one of the beliefs. Religion and social customs, again more or less the same. Religions and social custom generally again talks about that a female should conceive and should also give birth to male child. But at the same time, when we are talking about today, that is also a little bit done that once a couple is in the process, the female has already conceived, we can go through certain methods to also understand whether the child, though it is not very legal, but we can understand whether the child that we are carrying is male or female. But those days it was not even done also. Medically, that was not possible also. And if we talk about our parents, if it is done also, it was not legal. If you have conceived, you have to give birth. But today it is done that maybe before 2 months, before 3 months, if a female has conceived and not very willingly, then they may abort also. So that was not allowed even till our parents' generation. It was not allowed that way. So religious and social customs. Desire for a male child, already we desire for a male. Of course you can. But why age?
Actually, I was eating.
Oh my God, so long. What an excuse. Now, desire for a male child, and lastly we talk about lack of desire for a male child. Already I discussed this, and the last is lack of recreation. That is generally in the concept that today, if you talk about a couple, you would generally hardly you would have any time for intimation. That is very true. Today, the husband is also very busy, the wife is also very busy. But if you talk about 2-3 generations back, number one, there was not so much of a long working hours even for the male member of the family. The female is always at home. So recreation, not too much that we have today. So that was also one big reason why the family size is the way big. So these are the points that you are going to go through. Next, you look into now this nothing much deforestation. Just take that point. Deforestation. Now, what are these points I am talking about? Rising population. What are some of the pressures on when the population is rising? What are some of the effects on the environment? Just we will go through this. Okay, I'm not explaining all of these are very common things. Already I've studied water scarcity. You understand forest. With the rising population, always we have understood the nature has been affected. Forest has been affected. Can you tell me how? Rising population के साथ what has been the impact on the forest? Deforestation. Why deforestation? More land should be available, and also the forest gives rise to so many products. Now today we are using so many different type of furniture and etc. And all these things from the raw materials are from there, from the forest only. No. So that concept you should understand. Energy take karo. Some of these basic concepts already you have studied in environment science in the earlier standards also. Let's go through this. Now, straight away we move into these things are not needed at all. Now, straight away we move into few statistical terms. Go to that. Could you see? What happened? Different book. This should be there. This should be there. So this is what I discussed just now. This is what I discussed just now. And just certain basic things, this is what I asked them to go. This one. Okay. So that's it. Now straight away we move into this statistical terms. Dekha, what are those terms you should know? Number one is demography. Did you see that definition? Demography, that is. Next is population density, birth rate. What is the other alternative term for birth rate? Natality, death rate, mortality. So these 4 definitions are important. Okay, demography, population density, birth rate, natality, and next is death rate or mortality. Go through once, simple definitions to understand. So when we are talking about demography, you are asked to in the defined section, it will be given also. At the same time, you may be given these definitions in the other sections like true false. There also you may be asked to clarify whether the statement given is true or false. So that's the reason you should know this definitions. Demography, what is the definition? Demography, underline karo. The study of human population, the study of human population. Demography, underline the next is population density. Remember the unit. Unit is all quite often written wrong. Population density, the number of individuals per square kilometer area, at a given period of time. Birth rate, number of live births. Do you understand what is the meaning of live birth? During the process of pregnancy and birth, the child should be living. Stillbirth is not counted. Okay, even if there must be stillbirth quite a number of times, that is not counted. So number of live birth per, underline the definition, number of live birth per 1,000. Number of live birth, underline the definition, number of live birth per 1,000 per year. Same way, if I talk about mortality, number of death per 1,000 per year. So these four are important. Straight away, we now move on to family welfare, that part. Family welfare, that symbol is only to be aware about, only that much. The red triangle, and now methods of contraception. Methods of contraception. Of course, we haven't completed that previous chapter on population. They're all, reproduction. They're also able to come across this. Now, contraception, look at the first method, hormonal method. Hormonal method. Here, what is the meaning of hormonal method? And what are we talking about? Contraception actually means what? Contraception means certain methods by which we can stop allowing the process of fertilization happen in the female body. So that is basically. But are males also involved in the method of contraception? Yes, because whenever we are talking about the process of fertilization, the male gamete should not enter into the female body. You are not entering at your own sweet time. No, you can. Of course, you can. But what is the time? What time is the lecture? Is it? No. So we came early, 12:30 is the lecture. We came early. Go sit down. So now when we are talking about this, so what we were discussing, hormonal method. Let us start. Now this little bit important, you have to know some of these important terms. Hormonal method, now first as I said, contraception, is it only for female? No, it is also for male. Why for male? Because in the male body, the male gametes will be produced and the male gametes should not enter into the female body. In the female body, how can contraception or how can fertilization be stopped? Either by stopping a process known as ovulation. So we are going to learn in that chapter also. Reproductive system is over in your school? No. So ovulation, now that I speak of that word, ovulation, what do I mean by that? Ovulation is a process. I said, when I talk about contraception, contraception in the male body means the male gamete should not be allowed to release from the male body. So that is contraception in the male body. When I talk about contraception in the female body, what do I mean? Contraception in the female body means not allowing the process of fertilization happen. So how can that be brought about? If I talk about contraception in the male body, yes, certain temporary mechanical devices can be used, structures, devices can be used. They're called devices, but actually they are not machines actually, but these are also called devices. Female body, what type of contraception? Again, certain primary temporary mechanical structures can be used, or now that I talk about this, what I said, chemical method, no, hormonal methods, chemical methods. See here, what are the different concepts? So hormonal method, when I talk about contraception, hormonal method also known as chemical method. Hormonal method also known as chemical method. So what is done here? Various different type of pills are used. And what will the pills do? Prevent ovulation. Prevent ovulation. So now, if ovulation is prevented, what I said, what is ovulation? The release of ovum. The release of ovum from the ovary. The release of ovum from the ovary. What is ovum? It is the female gamete. Female gamete. So what is happening? We can stop this process by taking certain chemicals, pills. If this process does not happen, is it ever possible in the female body that the process of fertilization happens? Not at all. So is this a very good method when we are saying that yes, fertilization can be prevented by pills? Is it a very good method to be done actually? No, because we are also saying that it is hormonal. Hormonal method meaning during the entire process of fertilization during the wow. Oh, I think all of you are aware that the lecture is at 12:30.
Yeah.
Hmm? Is it so? He told me it is at 12. Huh? Beautifully. After the you will. So you are trying to say that you all are on time. So these girls are foolish that they came so early. Oh. Brave girls. So brave is. Your bravery is not going to stay for long, my dear. हाँ? बहुत जल्द तुम्हारा ये bravery जाने वाला है. So now that we are talking about, what I said that though we are talking about hormonal method, there you can sit alone. You don't need the textbook. Today we are seeing the strength of the class. I thought of completing the rest of those simple chapters. I'm not starting the main chapter. Let me see in the next break what is the strength after the break in the next lecture. So now as you're supposed to understand this way that this hormonal or the chemical method is one of the most disadvantageous method. Why? Because this pills once taken for a long period of time brings about a hormonal imbalance. You are asked questions. Which method or you are asked to take? Which method is the most disadvantageous? The mechanical, the chemical, or the surgical? The chemical is the most disadvantageous because it brings about a whole lot of a hormonal imbalance. Now, hormonal imbalance, what do I mean? Hormonal imbalance means, do you still remember the name of the hormones that are released from the ovary? And progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone. These two hormones are very much necessary for the entire process of conception, pregnancy, etc. Now, if a female is consuming such type of pills for a long period of time, this hormonal imbalances will happen. And as a result, the female may also become sterile. The female may also become sterile. What's the meaning of sterile? Infertility. Sterile means infertility. So as a result of infertility, the female may not be able to conceive and bring about the process of pregnancy at all for a long period of time. So that is what you have to justify that why do we consider this as a disadvantageous method. Now we talk about the barrier method, the mechanical method. The mechanical method has got certain more benefits. We are going to talk about this. Second is, I am talking about some mechanical methods. Mechanical methods are also known as barrier methods. Mechanical methods also known as barrier methods. Now, this method has got certain advantages. Let us learn the advantages first. What are some of the advantages? Advantages of these methods are they can prevent fertilization and at the same time they can prevent fertilization and also prevent from STDs. What are STDs? Sexually transmitted diseases. Quite a number of them that happens. So now that we are talking about, yes, it has got more of advantages. Now, can I write some disadvantages here? Yes, disadvantages also there. But disadvantages are nothing very serious to talk about. Disadvantages, we should only understand that there must be or there may be some minor infections only. Some minor infections only. Not as a long-term disadvantage that we can think of as in comparison with the chemical method. So that way, if I'm comparing these two, I should always understand that this is a more advantageous method. Now, what are those mechanical barriers we are talking about? We are talking about some diaphragms, which are basically membranous structures, which are basically membranous or latex cap-like structures, which are used in the reproductive parts. Very simple. And there are certain terms like the diaphragms are there, the cervical caps are there, the bones are there. And the texture and the material are more or less the same, can be used both in the male and the female body. So majorly you will be asked about the advantage, disadvantage part and some names and a comparison also that you are supposed to know. Last, number C, tick that word, sperm killing agents. They're also known spermicides. Spermicides. Now, spermicides, when we are talking about, these are also certain type of chemicals, basically rich in copper. Chemicals rich in copper. So this structures of these agents, whenever used, they would introduce a whole lot of copper ions in the female reproductive tract, and even if the male gametes are released, the male gametes could be killed. So there will be hardly a low density of the male gamete to fertilize the ova. Okay. So these are called spermicides. Spermicides. Underline that word, spermicides. Go to the next page. IUCDs. Could you see that word? IUCDs or IUDs? Intrauterine devices, or they are also known as intrauterine contraceptive devices. So now we talk about you are asked this as abbreviations also. Intrauterine contraceptive devices or intrauterine devices. So when I talk about IUCD or IUD, is the same thing. IUCDs or IUDs. Please take a note of that you may get also as the abbreviation in the expand set of questions. IUCDs, intrauterine contraceptive devices. Now, what are these? These are again intrauterine contraceptive devices. These are basically used in the female body. These are basically used in the female body, something like the copper T, the loops. Now, these are small structures which are inserted in the uterine wall, between the vaginal passages and the uterine wall. Now, what happens? Again, they basically release copper ions. Now, these devices, now when I again speak of devices, again I mentioned that these are just small structures inserted into the muscular wall on the outer wall of the uterus or the vagina. And then, now that they are releasing copper ions, what is the significance of the copper ions? Copper ions always act as a spermicide. Even if there is an entry of the male gamete, most of them will be killed, and hardly there will be male gametes left to fertilize the ovum. So, actually, the chances of fertilization in that female body becomes much lesser. Under normal conditions, also try to understand why am I speaking of this? Why is this concept mentioned this way? Under normal conditions, also, even if the male gamete enters in the female body, is it there? Is it this that every time the process of fertilization would happen? No, maybe roughly once out of 20 times. There is a chance that way. So, and on top of that, when the female body is using such type of contraceptives and spermicides, the chances becomes much less. Now, very important, we talk about the surgical methods. The method that we talk about is the surgical method. Now, in this, two terms, very specific to understand. One is vasectomy. And the other one, a comparison also you should know, vasectomy and tubectomy. Vasectomy, what are some of the characteristics? Now I'm going to ask you to write some differences. Vasectomy, I'm talking about this process is carried out in males. Tubectomy, this process carried out in females. What do I understand by vasectomy? Vasectomy means ligation. Ligation means a little bit a small cut, a small incision, a small cut. Why? To discontinue the passage. Okay. Now, do you still remember? No, we haven't finished the structure. So now, if you just refer to the two diagrams that you have in your book. Refer to the two diagrams that we have in your book. I first of all talk about vasectomy. First of all, try to find out the tube known as vas deferens in the diagram. Did you see that? Now, vas deferens is actually a tube-like structure. Then you'll understand, remember the terms very simply. Vas deferens is a tube-like structure which is responsible for carrying the male gametes from the testes to the urethra. The testis is, we are going to learn, the testis is the male gamete, the male gonad, which produces the male gamete. Testis is the main organ of the male system, which produces the male gamete. But very close to the testis is a tube-like structure. What is its name? Vas deferens. What is the job of the vas deferens? Carry the male gamete and deposit it into the on the sides of the bladder and the urethra. Then only there's a chance of release of the male gamete. अब ये समझो, if the vas deferens is cut, discontinued, will the male gamete be produced in the male body? Yes. Male gamete production में कोई problem नहीं है. Will the male gamete be passed into the urethra and released from the male body? नहीं हो सकता. But remember again, you get this question also at a time. A male body which has undergone vasectomy, does the male gamete get produced normally? Yes, because there is no hormonal change that has happened. Male gamete production hoga, but the release of the male gamete will not happen. So if the release of the male gamete is not happening, can this male be responsible for the process of fertilization ever? No, this male is not undergoing or helping in the process of fertilization. So this is the concept of vasectomy. So what I want to understand, ligation of which part I said? Ligation of vas deferens. Remember this word, ligation of the vas deferens I'm talking about. So ligation of the vas deferens, which in which body it is happening? Male body. Vas deferens, what is the function? We are going to learn later also in the other chapter. Vas deferens is always meant for the passage of the male gland in the spot. Let us come to the female part now. Tubectomy. When I talk about tubectomy, remember this. Tubectomy taking place in the females. Same concept, try to understand. It is happening where? What is it bringing about? Ligation of the oviduct. Locate karo oviduct. Oviduct. And what is the other name for oviduct? Fallopian tube. So what do you say should be the function of the oviduct or the fallopian tube? Now oviduct, again, look at the female system just as of now to understand. Ovary, same like the testis in the female body, producing the female gamete, ovum. Female gamete, ovum. So female gamete ova is produced in the ovary and present in this duct-like structure. So if I'm talking about the female system, something like this, say suppose I understand that the female system is something this way, and this is the ovary here, and the ovary is producing the female gamete, and the female gamete is now released here. What is this process I told you? The female gamete is getting produced here, and it is now released coming into the fallopian tube. This is the fallopian tube that I draw here. This process is known as ovulation. I already told you. What I said? Ovulation is the release of the ovum from the ovary to come into the fallopian tube. So this process we are going to learn later in detail. So अब जब ये ovum यहाँ पे है, and if the male gamete enters, then only there's a chance of fertilization. But if we make a cut here, is the female gamete getting produced in the female body? Is the female gamete getting produced? Is the ovum getting produced in the female body? Even if in a female body the fallopian tube is cut, is the ovum getting produced? Yes. Production में कोई problem नहीं है because the ovary is intact. What are the two hormones necessary for the formation of the gamete? Estrogen, progesterone. There's no problem with that. So abhi this female cannot participate in the process of fertilization. Why? Because the male gamete cannot come in contact with the female gamete. There's no, so even if the male gamete is entering, the male gamete can it come in contact with the female body? Not at all. So these two methods you should understand very specifically. You get few questions on this. Take out your notebook. Let us run.
So what will happen to the ovum which is getting perfectly?
It will finish its lifespan because the male gamete has got a lifespan of 2 days. It's a cell, no? It's a cell. After 2 days, it will be starting its process of disintegration and death. It's a dead cell now. It will get disintegrated and it gets released out along with the body waste. The ovum has got a lifespan of just 1 day, 24 hours, roughly 24 hours. So in this 24 hours, what will happen? No process of fertilization will take place. And after 24 hours, it will enter into a process of disintegration and death. Just like any other cell which completes its lifespan and dies out. Okay. Take out your notebook to write down two differences in the difference section. Very, very often you are asked to write differences on this. Two differences between vasectomy, tubectomy. Write down in your textbook, write down in your notebook, but write. You have to write this two basic differences between vasectomy and tubectomy. The first difference, vasectomy. Permanent method of contraception in males. Remember, it's a permanent method. What do you understand by temporary and a permanent method? Permanent method means it's a cut. You cannot retrieve it. No. Hota hai, I should not say that it is not possible. It happens quite a number of times. That's reality. Quite a number of times. Sometimes maybe the female or the male, for any other particular reason, after the first child, the female may have gone through this process, or the male may have gone through this process. And then maybe after 4 years, 5 years of time, they again want to have a second child. Is it possible? Yes, today it is possible. What do they do is they insert certain tubes in between, artificial tubes in between. And of course, the chances of fertilization at the time is a little bit lesser, but it happens. So it can be made, the process of fertilization can be done again under certain cases, but normally we consider this as a permanent method. It's a permanent method as compared to mechanical. Do we need any medical help for this method? No, nothing. Except for the property and all. Otherwise, for diaphragms and surgical caps, no. We don't need any medical help for this. Okay, the first point. What I said, the first point? Permanent method of contraception in males. Contraception. Permanent method of contraception. Permanent method of contraception in males. Other side. Write down permanent method of contraception in females. Tubectomy. Number two. Vasectomy. Ligation means small cut, remember, ligation, a small cut made at the surface of the tube. Ligation of vas deferens. Other side. Tubectomy, ligation of the oviduct or fallopian tube. Ligation of oviduct or fallopian tube. Ligation of oviduct or fallopian tube. Number three. For vasectomy, release of sperms. Release of sperms are restricted. Other side, release of ovum restricted. So from this chapter, only this much that we have to study. MTP, just a concept I'll tell you. Generally, you don't get too many short questions actually, but you may just read that. Okay, underline that word MT, that abbreviation MTP, that the abbreviation you should know, MTP. What is MTP? Medical termination of pregnancy. Now, when we are talking about medical termination of pregnancy, commonly we say that commonly that word is used. That is, you must have often heard people talking about the word abortion. Now, what's the meaning of abortion? Abortion, does it have any rules or anything? We can do it anytime. No, there are certain rules to it. When we are talking about abortion, say suppose female has conceived willingly or unwillingly, whatever, the female has conceived. Now, after a period of 1 or 2 months, the female comes to know that the female or the male partner has some genetic disease. If the male or the female partner has some genetic disease, the child is sure to get it. Blood-related disorder, chromosome-related disorder, if the parents have, then the child is sure to get it. So if that is one big reason, or if there are many reasons actually when I talk about economic issues and etc., health issues of the female, etc., then the female may try to go for abortion, would want to go for abortion. Can the female go for abortion on her own choice? Yes, she can. Yes, she can. Does she need to take the consent of the male partner? Not actually. She can go through. But can she go through the process of abortion at any time? No, it has to be before 5 months, before the 5th month. It has to be before the 5th month. If she is aware about some major dental disorder or something after the 5th month, can she go for the process? She cannot. Then in that period, in that circumstances, she has to go through the entire process of pregnancy and then birth. So these are some of the rules. So how will she understand? There are certain tests. The couple, are they able to understand that whether the child that they are going to give birth to would be healthy or not? Only under certain special circumstances when either of the member suffers from some basic genetic disorder or major health disorder. Only under such conditions, there may be certain special tests are done, and then it is. There are very many. Say suppose quite a number of times the child may be born with some blood-related disorders like blood cancers and all. The child may be born with some chromosomal disorders. One chromosome, a small part of the chromosome missing also would make the child, and quite a number of times that may not get expressed in the parents' body, but that will get expressed in the child's body, the children that they deliver. There are many such. If I talk about the Down syndromes, the Klinefelter syndromes, the Turner syndromes, and many more like this, phenylketonuria, there are a whole lot of diseases that children may suffer. So in case that any of the parents, like hemophilia is also one very common. Quite a number of times, that is true, quite a number of times, especially when we talk about arranged marriages. In arranged marriages, we don't come to know what are some of the genetic diseases the male and the female partners have. So make it a point when you all go through these processes. So now, when we are talking about quite a number of times, we come across that partners, they know each other for 10 years, but they don't know about all these things because people don't disclose all these things. No? So be aware about all these things when you are about to go through those processes. Because now what happens after maybe a courtship of 5 years, 10 years, also people are not aware. And only during those medical processes, the doctor makes them aware that this is what is there in the fathers or the mothers. And then if they want to abort, that has to be anyhow before the 5th month. So these are some basic knowledge that you should have. Let us complete some few exercises here, and then I think we are done with this chapter. Nothing much here. We are done with this chapter. Just try true and false. Just try this and go through these questions on your own. Agar koi ek tumko doubtful lage, then you ask me. Otherwise, I don't feel anything that we have to discuss too much. Number 4, go through. Definition, I already told you some of these definitions which are very, very important: birth rate, death rate, and population density of those few. That is it. Okay, go through this and then we can move on to the next chapter. Questions, go through the questions, especially question number. Especially question number 6, 10 already we discussed, sometimes from some 1 or 2 mark questions may again. 13. That's it. 14. Achha. Because those were in your home, in your okay, here in your book. Number 5 is number 5. Number 5, Nico. No, number 6, I told you that's not needed. Number 5, question numbers are different. Number 7. Number 8. That's Did you get those topics there in your book? No, questions may be different. Come on, show. You just try this. All this is great. This is unit 5. This is unit 5. That's it. That's it. This type of question sometimes for 1 mark you may get. This type of question, check out if there's any mistake in the statement. This I gave them also to do. This I already asked you to do. This already I asked you to do. This already I asked you. Only this question. What is it? 18 for girls, 21 for boys. What is it now?
21 for girls and 24 for boys.
23 for boys. 23 for boys, correct. 23 for boys. Differences you are asked between natality, mortality, population density and what's the other one? Growth rate, population density and growth rate you are asked to be the common questions. Done? Done? What is the next chapter in your book? The chapters are over, pollution and all. That was before your exam only, no? This exam. This exam. Your prelims dates are declared already. Now, for this chapter of pollution, I'll just give you some 10-15 questions that you will try to answer. Okay, nothing much again, quite simple. But you take a note that these are few questions that you should know the answers of. Already you have solved some questions of the text also, but make it a point that you don't miss out some of those important things in this chapter to go through. If you are done, take out your notebook. If you are done, take out your notebook. So we are done with these 2 chapters. After finish with this, and human evolution is not there. Before we wind up, we may just go through and just an information. Today we'll try to finish with this, and let's see, maybe in the next lecture, if some more are there, then we may start with nervous system, continue that part of the chapter. And after we are done with this, at least for 1 lecture or 1 or 2 lectures, I intend to solve a complete paper, 1 or 2 complete papers with you. Okay, so keep reading the previous chapters also, so that you are able to answer most of the questions. Okay, so there you should not tell me that I forgot that particular chapter and I'm not aware about those chapters. I think we are just left with nervous system, central organs, and reproductive systems. Other than that, we are almost done. So these small chapters I want to finish it up. Take out your notebook. Let me give those questions from this chapter. Pollution. Are you done? That side? Any question? Nothing. So take out your notebook. Take out your notebook. Chapter pollution. Some 10-15 questions I give you. Very common, important, that often comes. Genetics is remaining for this. Genetics we haven't done, no? Okay. Then nervous system I have to finish. They are not. Nervous system, So seeing the kind of strength when I entered the class was really depressing. Nothing. Take the first question, Patapat, pollution. The first one. Mention two gaseous pollutants. Mention two gaseous pollutants. फटाफट लिखो. अरे नोटबुक में लिखो. सीधे. You are done, no? With the previous chapter, solving questions done. Which chapter we were doing, Tanmay?
Now you are doing population control.
Population we are doing now, or we are done?
We are doing revision.
Which revision?
That's what I'm doing.
Abhi jo question that I asked you to do, these few questions which I asked you to do now, are you done?
Yes.
Acha, now take out your notebook. क्यों यहाँ से यहाँ जाने के लिए टाइम लग रहा है क्या मेरा वॉइस? हाँ, notebook निकालो. On the chapter of pollution, I'm going to give you some few questions which you will try answering, and that's it. There's nothing that I have to explain on this chapter. सब सिखाया. सिखाने की जरूरत सेम चीज तो 6th स्टैंडर्ड से पढ़ते आ रहे हो. तो I don't want to spend more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes on this chapter. Genetics बाकी है, reproductive system बाकी है, sense organs बाकी है. चलो, notebook है. Number 1, I said name two gaseous pollutants. Number 2, how can efficiency of engines be increased, or automobile engines? How can efficiency of automobile engines be increased? 1 mark question. Number 3. Give two reasons of vehicular air pollution. 2 reasons of vehicular air pollution. Next, why are particulate pollutants? Why are particulate pollutants? Why are particulate pollutants considered disadvantageous? Why are particulate pollutants considered disadvantageous? Mention 2 methods. Next question. Mention 2 methods. Mention 2 methods responsible for release of fine particles into the air. two methods for release of fine particles into the air. Why should burning of garbage, why should burning of garbage, why should burning of garbage, why should burning of garbage be stopped? Why should burning of garbage be stopped? Here you will write also the name of the harmful gases. When you are asked this for 1 mark, you should also write the name of the gases that are released, okay? Not to only write smoke. Next is, this is what is thermal pollution? What is thermal pollution? Just in one sentence. Thermal pollution, just for a sentence, you should know. All the things are simple. The release of, next question, the release of oil into ocean or estuary. The release of oil into ocean or estuary affects marine life. Give reason. Affects marine life. 1 mark. Affects marine life. Give reason. That is it. Give 2 examples each for biomedical waste and pesticides. Give 2 examples each for biomedical waste and pesticides. Biomedical waste and pesticides. There for pesticides, there is one common pesticide and its full form. You should know. Okay. Why are the last question? How many it is? 10 I gave you. Why are X-rays or why are frequent X-rays? Put that word frequent. Why are frequent X-rays harmful for the body? Why are frequent X-rays harmful for the body? Okay, so these are 10 short questions. Now come to the 2 mark questions there. These are 2 mark questions that I give you. Write down next. 10 short questions I already gave you. 2 mark questions. Name. This is question number 1. You'll have 2 parts in this question. Number one, the first part to write. Name the 2 harmful gases. Name the 2 harmful gases involved in acid rain. 2 harmful gases involved in acid rain. Mention one. second part of the same question, number 1. Mention one disadvantage of the same. Mention one disadvantage of the same. Mention one disadvantage of the same. Question number 2. Name the most common greenhouse gas. Name the most common greenhouse gas. How is, second part, how is deforestation? How is deforestation? Second part. How is deforestation? How is deforestation responsible for global warming? How is deforestation associated with global warming? Number 3, expand CNG. Expand CNG. Expand CNG. Second part, number 3. What is the role of ozone? What is the role of ozone? What is the role of ozone? Or what is the significance of ozone also you get? So that means here you have to write down the advantage part. Okay, significance part you have to write. Okay, so that's it. Do complete karo. Standard is there or not? I'm not sure. Maybe it's cut out or
Yeah.
that often comes. I share with the last okay, I have to clarify the part. Vehicle standard. Complete this questions. लिखना है ये सब छोटे-छोटे चैप्टर निकालने की बात है ये छोटे-छोटे चैप्टर पर दिस आर स्कोरिंग चैप्टर्स यू नो वैसे वेटेज बहुत कम है दैट्स व्हाई वी डोंट स्पेंड but you never know in a competition that 2 marks also counts no so that's why you have to go through पता चला इसमें because then all these chapters they have got a weightage maximum of 3 to 5 marks which is ज़्यादा नहीं है but if you are in a not सारे मिला के if I talk about the points something हो अपने आप advantage disadvantage the main concept if it is asked about the main gas involved वो तो correct ही होना पड़ेगा otherwise instead of sulfur compounds if you are writing some other compounds then of course you not get mark no? So if you are in a race, so that 5-meter distance also matters, no? So you should read, not to neglect and leave away. Sometimes it may also happen that 3-mark question comes and you are not very sure, and the mark goes there. So that should not happen. As it relates to health and all these things are already removed, and now these are all in the 9th standard syllabus. No, it's not there for you all. Within the 10th standard, there were 2 additional chapters which are all gone in the 9th standard now. You all have not studied. You all have studied the 9th standard, age to health and all. So you carry 10th B now. So they have removed it and put it in the 9th standard. And evolution has come. But neither evolution has been touched this time. But evolution also little bit you should know. Like 10th standard students, they know evolution. You all don't know anything about evolution. Now to 10th standard, 7th, 8th में भी नहीं है. तुम लोग 10th 9th में नहीं पढ़ते 10th में भी नहीं पढ़ते So now see, so many students who after 10th will take up those subjects. They don't know anything, they would not even know Homo sapiens के पहले कौन सा biological species था. That also good है. तो so you may be मुझे भी ये नहीं चाहिए. अब वो तो lead free petrol use or CNG lead free petrol or CNG. Efficiency also because CNG is more efficient in the sense it burns completely. Mileage not but mileage from it is giving you the machine, it is giving in small quantity, it is giving the machine full energy to run. Mileage कम मिलता है, but हाँ हाँ तो CNG if you are saying that mileage कम है तो what do you understand by that? Mileage कम है मतलब if I fill 500 ml 500 ml में अगर पेट्रोल जा रहा है 10 किलोमीटर CNG जाएगा 8 किलोमीटर like that no.
पर वो भारत से 2 लीटर में इंजन का efficiency तो दूसरा 1 लीटर में efficiency net petrol.
No, but CNG gives more mileage, no? Yes. CNG gives more mileage.
Petrol gives less mileage.
No.
इंजेक्टर में सीएनजी डालेगा फिर गाड़ी को जोड़ अगर सीएनजी अच्छा हो तो सीएनजी
cheaper and eco-friendly, pollution friendly.
रिक्शा वाले थोड़ी पर्यावरण के बारे में
ये 100 लीटर पेट्रोल
No, obviously it is cheaper. Cheaper to buy.
gives more mileage. हाँ गवर्नमेंट में कुछ भी लिखा है ऑपरेशन को पे चला के
People normally average people we have got petrol in our cars. क्योंकि हमको फर्क नहीं पड़ता. But vehicles से ज्यादातर CNG होते हैं.
कोई जो बोले
मारुति vehicles
CNG तो बिग व्हीकल्स में पेट्रोल ज्यादा कॉस्टली पड़ेगा. दैट्स द रीजन दे प्रेफर CNG. दैट्स द रीजन दे प्रेफर CNG. कार्गो है तो अभी 10 लाख 15 लाख का हिसाब मत करो. अभी फटाफट लिखो. दिनेश है राइटिंग चलो फटाफट कंप्लीट करो. आपको चैप्टर है इसमें से आपको एक और चैप्टर हाँ रिलेशन इज नॉट देयर. सो वी आर डन विद दिस. And reproduction. Nervous will be after the हाँ करो 5 मिनट से कंप्लीट करो then we can start. One point you should go. Final answers, whatever you go, complete, so that you are aware this many answers you should know.
Yes,
Mostly you will get all direct questions from here, no application questions actually. Baro. Are finish karo, I'm waiting for you all. Non-stop you are talking. So this part, let's finish after this. Trichloroethane. That you have to remember, huh? That is complete likho. Write and keep. Write and practice once. You have to answer all the questions. You need the book of, you need his book. Now for, देख के भी लिख सकते हो. Not a problem. Now I'm not testing you. I just want all of it to have these answers written in your notebook. Exercise, you know, to get you only one example.
One EDD.
All you want BHC, and all this stuff. BHC, right? All this is only one example, we will ask you only one. BHC, we need to do that a common exercise. Done? Discarded organs, you have to write. When you are talking about any surgeries and all, after surgeries and all, the organs are left out. Either they will be preserved if there's a otherwise they are just discarded. Discarded organs, blood packets, medical waste, syringes,
And use.
tablets also, expired tablets, all these things will come under that category. No, they don't. They will only give you to see. What are you going to do with that gallbladder? So maybe knowledge is different, that we have, that the family has to give a consent. Long back, the family has to give a consent, and within the death or within few hours of death, that has to be taken out from the body and preserved in special solution. Preserved in special solution, then only. So that has to be, you cannot, we cannot take and keep it in our, sitting room for people to come and see. Cannot. People go through major surgeries, removal of the liver, removal of the kidneys, removal of the reproductive parts. They'll only ask you to see, they will only ask you to see your family member. If the patient is very serious, only the family member, the closest family member will take no call to see. That's not sacred. But not so, huh? What, Risha? No, you get it. And it also, it is very, I've gone through this, I know, you cannot see your own body parts. When it is kept in that type of a medical container or something, it's very, very, it's very surprising. Oh my God, this organ looks like, yes, yeah. Now what I cannot disclose all my life secrets to you. He wants medical organs. If anybody goes to a surgery, medical organs can then be taken and kept in the sitting hall for people to come and see.
Yeah, medical.
So that is a museum. Our sitting halls are not museums.
Museum
special solutions, and that also that has to be changed. The solution has to be changed. Even in your simple biology lab, in your school, ask your teacher, the solutions need to be changed from time to time.
We have presents.
Or other animal features are also because you have this super and National has given you education for the last 12 years of your life. No, but then कोरोना कंप्लीट ये करो हो गया
जानी की अलग है
वो करना है ये साइड डाल not because so much time on this chapter. What wrong? I'm so I want this. Last few questions I didn't complete. I'll not give you any time. After the break, straight away I start with this part of the chapter. Did you get all the questions that I gave you? Are there in that book? No, which one is not there? I will be searching. I give you 15 minutes for this chapter. So we will continue again after the break.
अरे इसको तो बोलते दिमाग में तेरे को पता था मैंने कहा था दिमाग वाला द्वारका का रीजन ना मेरे पास तुम्हारे activities what should be done very about meditation for that even इस्तेमाल बोल रहा है लोगों में आबादी को हम इंडियन को आगे बढ़ाएंगे ऐसे नहीं नीचे पे जोर से अरे नहीं मेरे दो तीन चीजें लो पैसों के इफेक्ट लगा बहुत काटने को फ्लेक्सिंग मार्जिन के पैसों का इफेक्ट नहीं बड़ी वो जो बिना सब साथ मेरे ख्याल से साथ में
अरे तू क्या कर गया अगर कौन ने जंप मारा
ये ऐसा होता है एक ऐसा लाइन बना देगा उसके बीच में
अरे वो बिल्कुल बाहर आके पड़
और ये चीज वही कर रहा था एक ऐसे लाइन अरे नहीं ये सबसे गंदा पेपर मैं लिखता हूँ मुझे प्राउड है
अरे उसका फोन बनता है पेट ऊपर
ये गौरव है रिकॉर्डिंग बड़ा पाव ला सकते हैं बड़ा पाव अरे ये बाजू में जेंटिक है वो अरे ए रुकना अरे उसका यार
इधर सांगितलं होतं 20 मिनिटं खाऊन येत चला
20 मिनिट का देंगे चलो
आधी आपल्या टेस्ट नंतर
तो जाने के लिए तो बोली कंप्यूटर दवा के
ये कुछ बात नहीं है ये लीडर है नाम काम
It's like that. What about the next वो एक्चुअली वैसे नहीं था लगा जान के ये बहुत अच्छा ऐसा क्या नहीं सी मैं बहुत यूनिक है शामिल यूजफुल है ना this son of a bitch I can okay मुझे लाया मैं सब भूल गया पता है सब भूल गया keep your eye on the stars down alignment what would the alignment are the reason important yes and then we do that. Listen, gimana itu langsung dia ada kos. Everything. सबसे बेस्ट ट्रांजिस्टर वाला गाना सुना था सर चुगलू GHNR Spotify अपडेट किया है आजकल क्यों देखिए आगे जाने के बाद तो प्रीमियम मार देते आपको एक अगर फॉरवर्ड करेगा तो प्रीमियम का ऐड आएगा और तो लाइक कहानी को तेरे हिसाब से वो डॉट भी गायब रहता है बैकवर्ड ब्लैक बॉक्स तो अगर हम काम कर रहे थे ये इशू लगाओ यार ये
Experience. हमारी कोई टीचर सारी हमारे सारे लोग कोई फॉलो नहीं करते सिर्फ मैथ्स टीचर को फॉलो करते मैथ्स टीचर थोड़ी रहता है मैथ्स टीचर अरे उम्र क्या है सब ये एक मिनट ना 24 20 अरे वो गांव में नहीं है ये आपने क्या किया मंडल का इंस्टाग्राम पे नहीं हमारी क्लास टीचर ना बच्चे का सीक्रेट है मारे क्या है सजेशन में आया सजेशन में आया और चाहिए था ब्रेक हाँ 2 मिनट क्या काम है नहीं और 1 घंटा की 2 घंटे काम को हाँ 1 घंटा कुल 1.5 घंटे ब्रेक दे देती साइन ऑल ऑफ यू तुम अकेले उसको तुम लोगों ने अकेले छोड़ के क्यों आ गए बेटर चलो थोड़ा सा बैठो नहीं तो ये आई कैन नॉट देखो इस साइड से तुम लोग को दिखेगा कम बेटर दैट साइड इज बेटर अरे सोहम इधर आ गया तन्मय इसके पीछे क्योंकि मेरा स्पीच मेरा वर्ड मेरा वॉइस तुम्हारे तक पहुंचते 15 मिनट लगेगा पर मुझे तुम लोगों के कोऑर्डिनेशन से तो समझ नहीं आ रहा वो चीज अच्छा मार्क्स मिलना है कि बातें करना है खाली हाँ फ्रेंड्स इंपॉर्टेंट है कि मार्क्स इंपॉर्टेंट है चूज करो यू हैव टू ऑलवेज चूज वन गुरमेट इधर आ जाओ meaning all 3 of you are going to get separated तभी मैं जाके ये chapter start करूंगी because every 5 minutes I'm going to give you a question and correct answer देना है फटाफट आ जाओ I give you 2 minutes फटाफट because when you are talking I get diverted बैठो सामने आ जाओ इधर आ जाओ all 3 separate what are you going to learn now
We are going to talk about the structure of the brain, structure of human brain. Notebook निकालो बेटा।
हम यहाँ पे किसको आवाज
हाँ, ठीक है। Provided we are able to hear me correctly. सुनाई दे रहा है? ये तुम्हारा फेवरेट चीज है कि तुम उस पर छिप सकते हो कुछ। हाँ, वही बता। Every 5 minutes, I'm going to give you a question to write to keep you alert. Okay. Notebooks ready. We are talking about structure of human brain. Some of the important concepts to remember. Human brain, when we are talking about human brain, is a mass of neurons. It is a mass of neurons. And what are the primary parts of a neuron? Cyton and the axon. Cyton, axon, and cyton has got the processes known as dendrites. So here we are going, already have learned many parts of a neuron. No? We are already talked about dendrites and the cyton and the axon and the myelin sheath, etc., etc. So many, but here we are only going to focus on two primary parts. And which are the two primary parts? The cyton dendrites as one and the axon as the other. These two. So, what is the brain? What is the brain? The brain is made up of what? The brain is made up of a mass of neurons, actually. Now, if I talk about that, what is its size? One question you get on this. What is its size? The size of the brain is roughly about, the size of the brain would be roughly if I have to talk about roughly around 4 to 5 meters, roughly around the size of a small ball, if I say the size of a small ball, with extensive amount of folds and curves and grooves. What would be the weight? The weight of the brain is roughly around 1.4 kgs, 1.35, 1.36 kgs, roughly. When we are talking about the neurons, the nerve cells, the brain has got compressed arrangement of the nerve cells. What type of nutrients are required for the functioning of the brain? Of course, the brain cell, the neurons also require a whole lot of nutrients like any other cells to function. Primarily, it requires what? Adequate amount of mineral ions. Adequate amount, unlike the muscles and etc., it does not require adequate amount of the glucose and all. Actually, it requires a whole lot of mineral ions and oxygen for the proper functioning of the neurons. Primarily, what type of mineral ions we are trying to understand? Sodium, chloride, sodium, chloride are the primary ions which are necessary for the functioning of the neurons. It also requires a whole lot of oxygen. Whole lot of oxygen is also required for the functioning of the neurons. So that is the first few concepts to talk about. Now we talk about the coverings, protective structures of the brain. When we are talking about the protective structures of the brain, here let us learn two concepts. If I talk about the bony structure of the brain, then bony structure of the brain is what? The bony structure of the brain is the skull or the cranium, the brain box. There, the brain box or the skull, bony structure I talk about. Second is what? The membranous covering. What is the other type of covering that we should understand? The other type of covering is the membranous covering. Here I am talking about membranous coverings mean these are made up of fine tissues, membranous structures, fibers, etc., but not a bony structure like the brain box or the skull that we talk about. Then the membranous coverings are how many? How are they arranged? 3 membranous coverings. And where are these membranous coverings? If I show you that this is the structure of the brain, and if this is where the brain mass starts, just next to this, now that I go outwards, next to this would be 3 layered membranous coverings first, and then there will be a hard bony covering, the skull. What I said, I'm moving from here outwards. So when I move from here outwards, I get the 3 layered membranous coverings, and then outward to those membranous covering is the skull. So that means when I talk about the outer region, first comes what? The skull. Then the membranous coverings, and these membranous coverings in one word, what are they called? These are called meninges. The membranous coverings in one word, what are they called? Meninges. How many meninges we have? Let us learn. The first meninge is dura mater. The second meninge, arachnoid. The third meninge, pyometer. Take a note of these terms. I'm going to give you questions, I said, every 5 minutes. First is what? Dura mater. That is the outermost meninge. So something like, if I'm talking about the structure of the brain like this, so I'm talking about this is the first layer. This becomes the second layer. And then maybe again, I talk about a third layer like this. So this, the first meninge, I talk about this as dura mater. This is the pyometer, and I'm sorry, this is the arachnoid, and this is the pyometer. So I have drawn this structure, making you understand that are these fused? Are these meninges fused to each other? They are not. They are not fused to each other. That means between any two layers, there's a fine gap. Between any two layers, between any two meninges, there is a fine gap. Then what is filled in this gap? What is filled in this gap? A particular fluid. And what is this fluid known as? I'm talking about a fluid here. I'm talking about a fluid here. So between the first and the second and the third, there's a fluid. So which fluid are we talking about? The fluid is known as the cerebrospinal fluid, which has a lot of functions to perform. So we are going to learn a little bit about these three. The first one is the dura mater, comparatively tough, made up of some fibrous tissues. Arachnoid, something like a sheath, something like a sheath. Now this sheath, again, is just a middle layer, and very close to this is the pyometer, which is vascularized. So remember, one major feature that you are asked also, right? One feature, one difference between the dura mater and the pyometer. This is a difference that you should write. So when I'm talking about the pyometer is vascularized. The pyometer is vascularized. Is the dura mater vascularized? No, it is white, fibrous stuff. There are some connective tissue fibers, actually, tissues. Arachnoid, a fine tissue layer again, and very close to the pyometer. But anyhow, though if I say that they are very close, but then still there are enough amount of cerebrospinal fluid here. Enough amount of cerebrospinal fluid here between the first and the second and the third. Some functions of the cerebrospinal fluid now you're supposed to know. What is cerebrospinal fluid? Is it watery? Not very watery, but a little bit dense. And when I say between these two layers, there's a dense fluid known as cerebrospinal fluid. What are some of the functions? Some of the functions of cerebrospinal fluid, take a note. I talk about some functions of cerebrospinal fluid. Now, when we are talking about the functions of cerebrospinal fluid, at least 2 to 3 functions you are supposed to understand. 2 to 3 functions. Which are those functions? Number 1, it acts as a cushion. It acts as a cushion. Now, what do we understand by the word cushion? It acts as a cushion, meaning, say suppose I talk about some air-filled or water-filled pillows or mattresses. So what is there? There's a lower layer, there's an upper layer, and there's air-filled or water-filled there, or gel-filled also nowadays. So what is there? So this is giving us that sponginess. That gives us sponginess. So whenever we are sitting on those cushions and etc., there's enough amount of that softness and the so that is what is known as the cushioning effect. So that acts as a cushion. But why in response to the brain we talk about? Why in relation to the brain we talk about? Because quite a number of times the blood that flows in this layer, or if at all we get some injury to the outer portion of the brain or the skull, isn't that immediately the set of neurons are damaged? No, immediately the set of neurons will not be damaged because this fluid can absorb enough amount of stresses or mechanical stresses also. So number 1, we talk about it acts as a cushion. Number 2, it also provides adequate amount of nutrition. This particular fluid that we are talking about, The cerebrospinal fluid is rich in various different type of nutrients. So these layers of the meninges that we are talking about, this layer that we are talking about, also absorb adequate amount of nourishment from this fluid. Adequate amount of nourishment they obtain from the fluid. Next, this particular fluid, so I already mentioned two functions. The third function that I'm talking about now, it acts as a shock absorber. This particular fluid also acts as a shock absorber. Now, shock absorber with reference to what? I already said it can absorb quite amount of mechanical stresses, etc. when we get. Now, say suppose if I mentioned that whenever we are children, whenever we are toddlers or infants, do you ever remember how many number of times we must have hit our head here, there? But does that mean that our neurons got damaged at that time? No, our neurons did not, because this cerebrospinal fluid can absorb, act as a or give mechanical resistance. Okay. Now I talk about shock absorber. Now what is the meaning of shock absorber here? Shock absorber here means quite a number of times we're extremely happy. Nerve impulse mechanism or transmission is faster. Quite a number of times we're extremely sad. No, whenever we are talking about the emotions high and low, quite a number of times you may be shocked, quite a number of times you may be happy, quite a number. That means the nerve impulse transmission is not stable. It is sometimes high. There's a spike also at times. There's a spike also at times. So whenever there's a spike, are we to understand that the neurons immediately get damaged? No, the neurons does not get immediately damaged, because this can absorb something like those, the electronic devices that we have at home. Say suppose I talk about the refrigerators, the washing machines, etc., etc. No, even there's a high voltage, the stabilizers inside can manage that. So even though whenever the machines are working, even though there is a spike or rise in the voltage, does our machine get damaged very soon? No, because it has got shock absorbers inside. So there the excess voltage can be managed, same like that the cerebrospinal fluid helps us. It acts as a shock absorber. So some few functions, of course, to remember what I said: absorbs mechanical stresses, helps protection. It also helps, gives us protection, prevents from mechanical damages, also acts as a cushion, also acts as a shock absorber, and overall also provides nourishment. Okay, a whole lot of nourishment. Now about the three layers. Now let us learn a little bit more about the parts of this. So when we are talking about the parts, after the layers, covers, now we talk about the main parts of the brain. First of all, you should know about the divisions of the human brain. What are the divisions, first of all? The divisions of the human brain. If I talk about the divisions of the human brain, first of all, I talk about the forebrain. The forebrain. What are the parts of the forebrain? The parts of the forebrain are cerebrum. That's the largest part of our brain. What is the next one? What is it? We talk about the diencephalon. And the diencephalon again is made up of thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus and hypothalamus. Okay. Next is we are talking about the midbrain. Now the midbrain, not too much in detail for you all. Midbrain is made up of certain lobes, small aggregation of neurons. So the midbrain has various types of lobes. When we talk about the optic lobes, we talk about the optic lobes, we talk about the auditory lobes, and many more. So we are talking about some few as per what is there in your book only right now. So we are talking about the optic lobes, auditory lobes. Then again, very important, we talk about the hindbrain now. We talk about the hindbrain. What are the parts of the hindbrain? We talk about cerebellum. Cerebellum. And then we talk about the pons varolii. We talk about medulla oblongata. Okay. We talk about the medulla oblongata. So these are the divisions of the brain that you have to study. These are the divisions of the brain and their parts, functions you have to study. I want all of you to write it down because in your book it is not given in this sequence. So these are the parts of the brain that you have to study. What are the parts of the forebrain? This is what you are supposed to write. Mostly children write only this. No, this is the complete cerebrum and diencephalon itself made up of thalamus and hypothalamus. Got it? Midbrain, as I said, nothing much for you in your syllabus, but this much at least we will talk about. Hindbrain, three main portions. What are the three main portions? Cerebellum, pons viroli, and medulla oblongata. Now we start talking about the cerebrum. Now we start talking about the cerebrum. Now, cerebrum, the most important part of the brain, the largest part of the brain, 3/4 of the brain, I should say. So from where to where the cerebrum basically starts from here till this part. It's all cerebrum. From the middle of your forehead till this part is all cerebrum. See here. This entire part is all cerebrum. The pink region that you can see is all cerebrum. So it is generally understood that almost 3/4 of the brain is cerebrum. All major functions by cerebrum. And after cerebrum, we have to talk about the midbrain. The midbrain more or less helps the cerebrum. That's it. The midbrain performs many functions which are already done by the cerebrum. So it is something like the parts of the midbrain is more or less assisting the cerebrum. And the functions of the hindbrain completely different. Okay. So as I talk about the cerebrum, what are you supposed to understand? Cerebrum is the outermost, or cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. Cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. So some important facts about the cerebrum that you are supposed to study, supposed to remember. We talk about the cerebrum now. So cerebrum, first of all, I said this is the largest part of the brain. Almost 3/4 of the brain is cerebrum. Remember, 3/4 we are talking about when you get in your question. 3/4 of the brain is cerebrum. Now, this part, the cerebrum, has got halves. What are these halves known as? Cerebral hemispheres. Cerebral hemispheres get acquainted with these names. Now, this is the cerebrum that I'm talking about. This entire region is a cerebrum. This entire region is a cerebrum. But this cerebrum is actually two sets of neurons. The right part, the left part. The division is not this way. The division is this way and this way. So this is the right part, the left part. No? So when we are talking about between the right and the left part also, there are some connecting neurons which keep on passing messages from the right to the left. But how does it help us? It helps us something like this. When I'm writing, I'm able to keep the pen. When I'm picking up the book, I'm able to do something with the left hand also. Coordination, the right and the left side of the body. Right and the left side of the body. Otherwise, it is generally understood that this set of neurons help in regulating this type of function. The left side of the cerebrum helps in regulating all the right side, the right body functions, and the right side of the cerebrum helps in regulating the left body functions, which is the opposite actually. So now when we are talking about the halves of the cerebrum, what are the halves of the cerebrum known as? Cerebral. They are admitted with the name. Cerebral hemispheres. How many cerebral hemispheres? Two. The right part and the left part. When we talk about this cerebral hemispheres, now I'm talking about the cerebrum. This cerebral hemispheres or the cerebrum, if cut longitudinally, if a section of the cerebrum can be made longitudinally, what is the meaning of longitudinal? If this is what longitudinal I have to cut from top to bottom. Longitudinal. Now, if the brain can be cut longitudinally, you can see, no? Oh, it is blurred from that side. Longitudinally. If it is longitudinal, then the outer region is known as cortex. Inner region is known as medulla. Same terms like the kidney. Kidney already has come up with the same terms, no? Cortex, medulla. Here also the same. Outer region cortex, I'm talking about the cerebrum. Outer region cortex, inner region medulla. So the cerebrum has got outer region known as cortex and inner region known as medulla. Term remains same like the kidney, same like the, which is the other adrenal gland. Same that we had said. Cortex, medulla. This cortex is known as the gray matter. This cortex is known as the gray matter. And the medulla is also known as the white matter. Give reason. Cortex is known as gray matter because what to write? ये चैप्टर हो गया ना स्कूल में? अच्छा, ये मतलब कंप्लीट नहीं हुआ चैप्टर स्कूल में? अच्छा. Very common question that comes in your paper. Why is cortex known as gray matter? Because the gray matter, the outer region of the cerebrum, is having a rich concentration of cytol. And since the cytons, do you still remember when we draw the diagram of the nerve cell body? What are those granules which give us silverish color? Nissel granules. Nissel granules. Okay? The nissel granules, if we draw some nissel granules there, when we are drawing the nerve cell body, do we draw some nissel granules here? And then comes the dendrites, no? We draw generally this way. So, ye jo nissel granules hai, this is what is responsible for the grayish silverish color, and hence the name gray matter. So, questions, remember, you will write specific answers when I ask you. So, cortex, what is it? Outer part of the cerebrum, outermost part of the cerebrum, known as gray matter because it has a rich concentration of the cytol. White matter, why? Because it has got a concentration bundle of exons in it. The white matter is nothing but bundle of exons. Another thing to remember that now that I talk about the gray matter, the gray matter is extremely folded, and this is what is known as the gyri or the gyrus. What are gyri? What is gyri? I'll show you in this figure. So when we are talking about the cortex, what is the next concept that I'm telling you? If you look into the cortex, can you see this? The entire structure is actually like this, folded. So it is the outer cortex which is folded. Can you see this? The folds, can you see? Something like, if I talk about the entire thing, it is not straight arranged, linearly arranged. No, not that way. It is extremely folded and folded and folded and folded. So when I talk about, it is something one fold and two fold and three fold. So there is a gap between the two folds. What are these folds of? These are the folds of the gray matter that I'm showing you. And what are these folds known as? This is what is known as the gyrus one. Gyri plural. And in between there are grooves, no spaces, no in between. So this is the groove. This is the groove, or I will also call it as the sulcus plural sulci. So come across these two terms. Gyrus, sulcus. What is it? What are they? Gyrus and sulcus. Gyrus or gyri are the folds. Sulci are the grooves, gaps. We don't write gaps, we write grooves. Grooves in between the folds. Where is this present? Cerebral cortex or medulla? Cortex. In the cerebral cortex means ज़्यादातर ऐसा होता है where the entire region is folded. But why necessary? Can you tell me? Folds ज़्यादातर हमने जहाँ पे भी पढ़ा है, whether it is villi or etc. Surface area. तो अभी brain के साथ surface area का क्या relation हो सकता है? More neurons. So more neurons अगर होगा faster transmission. तो उसके लिए what type of behavioral features will come across in an individual? More sharp and intelligent. So does that mean that if I talk about a human, now that we all are human, so should we have the same number of neurons? No. But yes, our neurons, if we are all human, the number of neurons will fall in a scale. Say suppose I talk about human species, all should be having a number of neurons, say suppose something like 10 to 50 के अंदर होना ही चाहिए. But people who have got something around 45, 46, 48, 49 neurons and extensively folded, they will be extremely sharp and fast. And people who will have a lower size, say suppose something like 15 and 20, they will take comparatively a longer time to grasp and revert and attention. So all these. So the higher surface area and the maximum packing of the neurons is what is responsible for the sharpness, the intelligence that we come across. No? So that's what makes us different, the arrangement of the neurons and the number of the neurons. But again, to understand, since we all are human species, all of us will be having the number of neurons in a particular range. Then what is when we are talking about the folds and this? Now next is what type of functions? What type of functions the cerebrum controls? Now the cerebrum controls three types of functions, as I already mentioned that the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. So of course it should be controlling the maximum number of functions. Okay, before that, I think one more part that we have to discuss is about the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. What it is? Corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. What it is? I'll show you first. Corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. Can you see this? Corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. Where is it? Corpus callosum is between the two hemispheres. Corpus callosum. When we talk about in a section, it appears this way. That the corpus callosum, what it is nothing but a sheet of connecting neurons between the right and the left hemisphere. What is it doing? Already I mentioned between the right and the left hemisphere, there should be some connecting neurons. Otherwise, messages cannot be transmitted from the right and the left, right and the left. Agar transmit nahi hoga to what will happen? Then parallel functions हम नहीं कर सकेंगे. Whenever we are moving the right part of our body doing right function, left paralyzed रहेगा. We will not be able to go in it. So, but we always do that, no? Right and left constantly we work. So that is. So what are you supposed to write? What is corpus callosum? What is corpus callosum? Listen carefully. It is a sheet of neurons connecting the right and the left cerebral hemisphere, transferring information between the right and the left hemispheres of the cerebrum, right and the left cerebral hemispheres. Okay. What are some functions now? Let us study about the cerebrum. What are some functions of the cerebrum? Some functions of the cerebrum to understand. Some functions of the cerebrum to understand. I said three types of functions. First, we talk about functions like the cerebrum would control variety of voluntary functions. The cerebrum would control variety of voluntary functions. Variety of voluntary functions. What can be those? We can talk about, okay, we'll name some of those voluntary functions. Then we talk about some sensory functions. Let us just categorize first. And then we talk about some behavioral functions. So variety of functions. Three types of functions the cerebrum can bring about. So I said one is the voluntary functions. So all these somatic functions, voluntary functions, it categorizes, it brings about. So can we name some voluntary functions? Now that I'm talking, now that you are writing, are these voluntary activities? Yes. Controlled by cerebrum. Now that we are swallowing, now that we are eating, now that we are chewing, now that we are smiling, now that we are talking, reading, all voluntary functions. Now that you are talking, jumping, all voluntary functions controlled by cerebrum. Sensory functions, if I have to talk about, what are some sensory functions? The perception of light or vision, if I have to mention in simple. Vision, elaborate function carried out by cerebrum. Hearing, elaborate function it is, no? Such a complicated process actually works in our body, carried out by cerebrum. So that way, if I have to mention then what is the role of cerebrum here? Because we have got our eyes which can sense light, and then the process of image formation, everything is happening in the eyes. Then what is the role of the cerebrum here? We are talking about the ears and such a complicated structure inside. The sound waves go and a whole lot of mechanism in the ear. What is the role of the cerebrum there? The cerebrum does the final giving commands. So say suppose if I have to talk about the eye, of course the receptors are there in the eye only, receiving the light and the image formation, everything. But if the cerebrum was not there, the sharpness, the distance, and the image correction would not have been possible. Then every object that we see would have been blurred. Every object that we see, you would not have been understanding what the correct distance is. Maybe I get to see a box, I try to touch it on the third bench, but probably it's on the last bench. The distance is being done by the cerebrum. The sharpness, the distance, and the correction. Correction means our eye can only see everything inverted. But that correction is done in the brain, and that's the reason we see everything upright. That way. So all these corrections are done in the brain. Never mind, the perception and the receiving is done by our eye. So same is by the tongue, same is by the ear, same is by the skin. So that is what you understand as sensory function. Then what are you supposed to write here under this? Sensory function means you are supposed to write all. Vision will come, hearing will come, smell will come, taste will come, all these functions, touch will come, pain, etc. All this, okay? Now let us talk about behavioral functions. Behavioral functions. Now, अब ये जो दो function I have been speaking about, this is the same in all of us. This is the same in all of us. When I talk about the voluntary function, same in all of us. Sensory function, same in all of us. But we all differ in this category of functions. What are some of this? Let us name at least 5. What are some of this? I talk about this one. Are we same in? Are we all same in this function? Are we same? No, not at all. Say suppose I talk about this. Are we same in this, all of us? Are we same in this, all of us? Are we same in this, all of us? Are we same in this? This functions, no, all of us we are different in this, no? Retention, willpower, memory, analysis, reasoning. So all this, again, based on the compactness or the arrangement of the neurons in the cerebrum. So this we call it as behavioral functions. This comes under the category of behavioral functions. So all these will be the functions of cerebrum. So what are some of the common functions of cerebrum? Memory, willpower, of course. These were asked of in the paper. Sensory perceptions like vision, smell, sight. Yes. When we are talking about voluntary movements, voluntary functions, movement of the body parts. Of course, these are all functions of the cerebrum. Next is we move on to the next part. What was the next part we have been talking about? We have been talking about the diencephalon. We have been talking about the diencephalon, another important part of the forebrain. We have been talking about the diencephalon, another important part of the forebrain. The moment I'm turning, that's and everything is falling down. Why? Sleepy? No? You need to go out for a minute. Chalo. Right, 2 questions. Number one, I'll give you questions to cover up almost all types of questions. Number 1, write 2 differences between gray matter, white matter. 2 differences between gray matter, white matter. I already taught you 2-3 points. Gray matter, white matter. State the location and function of corpus callosum. Location and function of corpus callosum. Location and function of corpus callosum. Mention, next, number 3. Mention the significance of. Mention the significance of the folds and convolutions. Now, the folds I already discussed about, that's also known as convolution. Convolution means folds. Get acquainted with this word. Mention the significance of the folds and convolutions of cerebrum. Folds and convolutions of cerebrum. Remember these concepts of cerebrum. Again, we will compare with cerebellum later. Give you a book. Can you give me a book for a minute? One more question you will write. Two differences between durometer and pyometer. Two differences likho. Two differences between durometer and pyometer. Huh?
We have to write it.
No, you will write. If you have a confusion, bolo, I will tell you. But think what I told you. Confusion hai? Pyometer. Two differences between durometer, pyometer. Exact location of corpus callosum did I give you? Yeah, exact location function of corpus callosum. Now, there are some extra questions also to discuss later. Chalo, you do now. Not more than 5 minutes. Huh? Fatafat karo. What happens to one who books you sign? Fatafat. No books, that's why you don't have to book. Can you give him one book? Wherever there's a doubt, please clarify. खाली book से copy नहीं करना है. You have a doubt, clarify. So we have studied the detailed structure of the cerebrum, the parts, functions, structures, differences between the terms, their location should be very clear. Any doubt? Anybody has a doubt? This part should be very clear. The terms, structures, functions should be very clear. You will get enough questions from this part of the chapter. This entire part of the chapter, structure of the brain, very, very important. Location of corpus callosum. What are you supposed to write? Between cerebral hemispheres. Between the cerebral hemispheres. Cerebral hemispheres. Function क्या लिखोगे? To the other. One cerebral hemisphere to the other लिखना है. Because there is something also known as cerebellar hemispheres we are going to study later. So if you write hemispheres only, some teachers will put a question mark. कौन सा hemisphere? Cerebral ki cerebellar? So you have to write complete cerebral hemispheres.
Durometer has blood supply.
No. Durometer is the outermost layer, so that becomes the first difference. Durometer is the outermost, pyometer is the innermost. Durometer, non-vascularized, no blood supply. Non-vascular. And tough, okay. And pyometer is richly vascularized. And it is comparatively softer. Comparatively softer and vascularized. That concept of vascularization has to be mentioned as a difference. I am asking you roughly now to write two difference so that you cover everything, but actually in your paper you will be asked to write only one difference based on the criteria that they give in the bracket. Done?
Now, For third, it will be maximum number of poles present the person will be smart.
When increase, what question I gave you?
Over lost.
Mention the significance of
Of
and formulation of sediments.
mention the significance of the number of folds and convolutions. What answer you're supposed to write?
Increases the surface area.
The maximum number of folds and convolutions increases the surface area, or maximum number of folds and convolutions includes maximum number of neurons and increases the surface area. Maximum number of neurons also. Maximum number of neurons, thus increasing the surface area, and
I have written like they both are present because they accommodate maximum number.
accommodate maximum
Increases the surface area.
surface area and makes the process of nerve impulse conduction efficient and faster. Makes the process of nerve impulse conduction efficient and faster. So you don't have to write actually in your paper that makes an individual smart or intelligent, but this is what you are supposed to write. Then after you write this, then the second sentence, if you want to write that this increases reasoning, willpower, intelligence, that you may write, but that becomes an optional statement. So majorly what should be there in your answer? It accommodates, folds. What does it include, or what does it refer to? Folds can accommodate maximum number of neurons, thus increasing the surface area, and hence making the nerve impulse conduction faster and efficient. Okay, all done? All questions done, no, all of you? Now, next, what are we supposed to study? We are supposed to study about the diencephalon. Now, diencephalon, I said, okay, let me just show you the diencephalon first of all. Diencephalon, if you see in your diagram also, you can see two parts, thalamus and hypothalamus. Can you see that in your figure there? Thalamus and hypothalamus. Can you see this in your diagram there in your book also? Check out in this diagram. Hypothalamus, this is the hypothalamus, and hypothalamus is a very important part. Hypothalamus, I think with reference to endocrine glands also we had studied a little bit, no? So hypothalamus, this is this part exactly. For labeling the diagram also, you will get this diagram quite often for labeling. So you should know every part of this diagram. Now hypothalamus is this region. Okay, and just above the hypothalamus is always a thalamus. A small set of neurons performing a particular function here, and hypothalamus as it is has got a whole lot of functions. So we are going to learn that. So hypothalamus and thalamus together forms what? Diencephalon, and that's the second part of the forebrain. So about the forebrain, we had already studied the cerebrum. So now the next part after cerebrum that we are going to study, so far the forebrain is concerned. So I said already we are done with this, and next now we are going to study the diencephalon. But when I talk about the diencephalon, the first part that we are going to talk about would be the thalamus. Okay, a small region, a small set of neurons. And what does this set of neurons do? It can receive messages relating to pain, pressure, something like, and then they can relate. They can receive and relay them where? To the cerebrum again. So when I'm talking about the thalamus, what is it doing? It is this set of neurons can receive messages from the receptors, receive messages. What type of messages? Messages relating to pain, messages relating to pressure, messages relating to stress and shock, and then transmit them where? To the cerebrum and get commands to the effectors. So do you remember what was the difference between these two words, receptor and effector? You remember? If I ask you now to write down one difference between receptor and effector, what should you write?
Receptor receives the impulse.
No. Receptor receives stimulus, and effector shows response. No, so that should be the difference that you should write. So now I'm asking you that what is the job? What is the job of the thalamus? Thalamus helps in relaying or transmitting pain pressure impulses to the cerebrum. Am I clear? So now, when I'm talking about the thalamus, what does it do? It can transmit or relay pain or pressure impulses, pain or pressure information on this. So we write specifically this word impulses to the cerebrum, takes up messages from the different type of receptors and deliver them to the cerebrum. What about the hypothalamus then? The hypothalamus actually does a whole bunch of functions. Hypothalamus has got so many other different type of functions to perform, but one major function that the hypothalamus does is it is acting as a body's thermostat. It is acting as a body's thermostat. Now, what is the meaning of the word thermostat? It can regulate body temperature. It can regulate body temperature. You have studied a little bit of this last year, I think, no? It has got endocrine role also. It releases a whole lot of hormones also. It can also regulate various different type of emotional stress conditions also. But the first thing that you are always to understand, thermostat, it regulates body temperature. What are you supposed to understand? It regulates body temperature. How can it regulate body temperature? Do you remember? Do you remember the concept of vasodilation, vasoconstriction? What was it? Vasodilation कब होता है? क्यों होता है? Vasodilation means whenever the outer temperature is very high, much higher than a body temperature, the skin gets larger supply of blood. Blood vessels start undergoing the process of expansion, the relaxation to increase the supply of blood so that the process of sweating can happen. Perspiration. Now, perspiration क्यों होना चाहिए? Because the outer environment is so the temperature is so high outside, and that would generate a cooling effect, no? And vasoconstriction, similarly, if I talk about the outer temperature, now that we are talking about in the AC at a temperature of something around 18 and 16, what happens? Should we sweat? Do we sweat? No, we don't. So what is happening at that time in our body? The blood vessels surrounding the entire region in the skin starts narrowing down, constriction. And this is something to conserve the body heat inside, because outside temperature is so low now. So that is the basic concept to understand. When I say hypothalamus helps in regulating body temperature. But apart from this also, when I'm talking about what are the other functions? The first one is already we said that hypothalamus helps in regulating the body temperature. What is the other role of the hypothalamus? Hypothalamus, of course, has got endocrine functions. We are not talking about that right now here. But it also regulates various different types of functions, regulates the biological rhythms. It regulates the biological rhythms. So what is the meaning of regulating the biological rhythms? Say suppose, whenever we are hungry, do we always keep a track that after 5 hours we should eat, or after 3 hours we should eat? We generally have that sensation of hunger. We generally have that sensation of thirst, no? We don't generally keep a marker or a timer that after half an hour only we are going to drink water. Sometimes after 10 minutes we may drink, and sometimes after 1 hour also we may drink, no? So this is what is known as biological rhythms, which the hypothalamus always regulates, that now there is a need for intake of water. So hunger and thirst. Hunger and thirst. So when I'm talking about biological rhythms, which are some of them, it regulates hunger and thirst. Okay, this is one that I told you. There's something more that we talk about. Sleep and wakefulness. Sleep and wakefulness. Okay, what does this mean? Again, there's a particular, do we have a particular timer that every time only at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock we should sleep? No. Sometimes we may feel sleepy and very exhausted by 9 o'clock, and sometimes we may feel very sleepy and exhausted maybe at 12 o'clock. And sometimes we may wake up without an alarm. No, without an alarm also we do wake up, no? Sometimes maybe on a regular weekdays we set an alarm and wake up at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. But sometimes we do also wake up without an alarm. Will you ever try waking up without an alarm? So how does that work? Again, that has also been brought about by the hypothalamus. So such type of functions the hypothalamus does quite a lot. These are all called biological rhythms. So some of the most common functions that you are supposed to write here is regulating body temperature as one, and regulating the different type of rhythms of our body. which always happens in a cycle. That is called the rhythms. Happening in a cycle, sleep, wakefulness, always in a cycle, no? And then hunger, also in a cycle. We now move on to the next part, that is the midbrain. So when I talk about the midbrain, already I mentioned that the midbrain has got a whole lot of lobes, small arrangement of neurons. Now look into the diagram page. In your book it will be different. Look at this. Tell me which page it is. 127, the first diagram. Take that diagram. Read that diagram very carefully. That diagram and the related diagram you always to get in your paper. That diagram is very, very important. Read all the parts and their locations. Can you locate the midbrain there? Can you locate the midbrain there?
10.6 or 10.7.
10.5. The first diagram. Now midbrain. Can you locate the midbrain?
Yes.
Now, if you talk about the midbrain is very close to the hypothalamus. Yes, the midbrain is close to the hypothalamus. Now look into that, the pineal gland, just above that. After that, if possible, we'll also look into some diagrams, how you learn to remember the names. Achha. Just very close to the midbrain, can you see up there, there is a small P-shaped structure. Okay, a small glandular structure, the pineal gland. That's not actually a part of the brain at all, but that's an endocrine gland. But sometimes you'll be asked also in this diagram to label. So take a note of that, the pineal gland, but we are not learning about the pineal gland and anything right now. Now the midbrain, take that part. How will you remember that? Which is the midbrain? The midbrain will be quite close to the hypothalamus. It is actually between the hypothalamus and the thalamus. Check that part, midbrain. Okay, and just next to the midbrain, you will come across parts known as the medulla, the pons actually. Just next to the midbrain, you will come across the parts known as midbrain, the pons. See here in this figure also. When I talk about this particular structure, I said this region is the thalamus, very close is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is there, down, and the region above will be always thalamus, and then very close adjacent to that is the midbrain. A small set of neurons. Then from that, the hindbrain starts. The first would be the pons and then the medulla, and on the lateral side is the cerebellum. So this is how you remember which portions are this. Now I talk about the midbrain. Certain few lobes are here, some small as of they are different small islands as it. Small aggregation of neurons. Some common ones to talk about would be the optic lobes. What are these optic lobes doing? Helping in vision. Some more to talk about would be the auditory lobes, helping in hearing. So same like that, when we are talking about the midbrain is an aggregation of some small set of neurons majorly helping in sensory functions. The midbrain generally does not help in variety of motor meaning voluntary and involuntary functions. Majorly such type of functions. So just little bit you have to study about it. We move on to this part, a major part of the chapter again, a major part of the structure of the brain again to study. Hindbrain. What are some of the parts? Hindbrain to talk about. The first part is cerebellum. Now look into the cerebellum in your diagram. Look at the cerebellum. This is the cerebellum. This is the cerebellum. What are some of the common features of the cerebellum and the cerebrum? The cerebellum, if you look into this, roughly a leaf-shaped structure on the lateral side of the brain stem. Now, this is known as the brain stem. The brain stem is something like when I talk about the pons viroli, the medulla oblongata, and the continuation as the spinal cord. Okay. So now this you understand as the hindbrain, the pons and the medulla, and just lateral to it, very demarcating. This is the cerebellum. Now the cerebellum and the cerebrum, how are they related? What are some of the points of resemblances? Are the cerebellum is also extremely folded. The cerebellum is also extremely folded. Remember, the cerebellum also has got the outer cortex and the inner medulla. Second similarity I'm talking about. The cerebellum also has outer cortex and medulla. What is the cortex made up of in the cerebrum? Cytone, also known as white matter. Here also it is the same. Here also the outer cortex is made up of cytone, known as white matter, and the inner medulla outer region known as the white matter, gray matter, known as made up of the cytone, and the inner region known as white matter, made up of the axon. Okay. So these are some of the similarities. These are some of the similarities. Again, one more similarity, fourth similarity. This has got halves known as cerebral hemispheres. This also has got halves known as cerebellar hemispheres. This also has got halves known as cerebellar hemispheres. And when we are talking about, now I talk about the difference. Cerebellar hemispheres, cerebral hemispheres. Now I talk about one difference. Here in case of the cerebral hemispheres, what was those connecting nervous tissues? Callosa. Here, now that I talk about the cerebellar hemispheres, the connecting tissues are the pons varoli. The connecting tissues here also, the pons varoli also has got separate functions also, but the pons varoli also form the connecting tissues between the cerebellar hemispheres. Okay. So now if I ask you to write down two differences between the cerebrum and the cerebellum. So this is one difference that you're going to write, structural difference. Let me finish. I'll complete with the functional difference, then you will write down that answer. So ये हो गया cerebrum, cerebellum. So एक है structural difference I told you. Let us now talk about the functions of the cerebellum. What are those functions of the cerebellum that you are supposed to understand? Cerebellum majorly helps in muscular coordination. Cerebellum majorly helps in muscular coordination. So whenever we are talking about cerebellum, we generally understand cerebellum helps in various different type of body postures. Okay, cerebellum helps in different type of muscular coordination and body balance. Body balance. So these are the functions that always you should remember. Muscular coordination, different parts of the body, muscular movements. Now that I am writing and talking, muscular coordination, which part of my brain is helping me? Cerebellum. Say suppose we are doing something, we are talking and we are writing something, muscular coordination, no? So at that time, the cerebellum is helping. Body balance. When we are talking about body balance, what does that mean? Are we able to hold our body every time? Yes, we are. That is because of the cerebellum. So when we are talking about body balance, every time that we walk, every time that we sit, every time that we sleep, every time that we are even, even when we are jumping or walking or running, that time also we are able to hold our body. No, we don't fall our body or we don't leave our body loose. That is the meaning of body balance. So that is all a function of cerebellum. So now when we are talking about two differences between cerebrum and cerebellum, what are the two differences that we are supposed to write now? One difference based on function, one difference based on structure. So if I talk about one structural difference, what is the structural difference I mentioned to you right now? Based on the corpus callosum and the pons. That was the first difference. Second difference, what I told you to remember, the functional difference. No, the functional difference. So here, majorly you are supposed to write down that the cerebellum helps in muscular coordination and body balance, and the cerebrum majorly helps in voluntary or motor functions and sensory functions. Behavioral functions, if you don't write also does not matter, but this two you should write. Come on, write up. Two functions. Before you forget, these points will be properly written. Two differences, similarities I told you many, 4 or 5 similarities I told you. Differences, yaad rakho. Two differences between cerebrum and cerebellum. Two differences between cerebrum and cerebellum. Two differences between cerebrum and cerebellum. Done. Because I have to tell you two differences between cerebrum and cerebellum. What is the first difference I told you? The two cerebral hemispheres are connected by corpus callosum, and two cerebellar hemispheres are connected by pons. Likho, likhe rakho, not to forget. So there's a question at time. Acha, likho pehle. Finish up first. Then I'll discuss this question also, so that if you get such type of questions, you know what to write. Make it faster a little bit. I want to complete with this entire part. So at least we are done with this section. Done. First point written, all of you. Second point क्या लिखना है? Functional difference लिखो. Is there any difference actually there are enough amount of structural difference over the gyri and the sulci, that is also there, but here we are not going into so much of depth. So that you understand, gyri sulci cerebrum में भी है, cerebellum में भी है. What is the other similarity? Cortex medulla. What is the other similarity? White matter, gray matter. Same arrangement. Okay, everything. Second difference you write about the functions. Cerebrum regulates voluntary and sensory functions. These are the primary functions. Sensory and voluntary functions. Then cerebellum regulates muscle coordination and body balance. No, involuntary by medulla. Don't write involuntary. Involuntary, that's wrong. Involuntary is by medulla.
Can we say even cerebrum controls willpower?
No, cerebrum.
Cerebrum.
Cerebellum, only body balance and muscular coordination. That's it. Body balance in the sense, now you get a question also this way. A person who is addicted to different type of chemicals, okay, different type of drugs, an alcoholic person, drug addict person, are they able to hold their body? No, not like us. They will not be able to hold their body even when they are sleeping, even when they are sitting, even they are walking or standing. Why? Because the neurons are affected because of those high dosage of the chemicals or the alcohol. And that's the reason the process of muscular coordination cannot be carried out. The process of body balance cannot be processed. Okay. The process of body balance cannot be carried out, cannot be regulated at all. So that's the reason the process of maintaining body balance, posture, etc., cannot be seen in them properly. Okay, now next is we move on to the second region. What is the second region of the hindbrain? I said the second region of the hindbrain is the pons viruli. Let us learn now some two functions of the pons viruli. Two functions of the pons viruli. What are the two functions of the pons viruli? So when we are talking about the pons viruli, one function what you already have come across, what is the first function that you can mention? Transfers impulses from one cerebellar hemisphere to the other. So that's the first function that we already know. Then what is the second function we are talking about? We can also write it regulates the rate of breathing. Now regulates the rate of breathing. That's the reason it is also known as a breathing center or a pneumotaxic center. It is also known as a pneumotaxic center. Pneumotaxic center. What is the meaning of the pneumotaxic center? And why should there be any need for breathing regulation? Is there any need for regulation of breathing? Does our breathing rate increase or decrease? Or it remains stable also of the day? Increase and decrease. Under what condition it should increase? When we are running, exercising, and should it ever decrease? Does it ever decrease? Yes, infection and disease. No? Even when you are relaxed, it's normal breathing rate, something around 20, 22, 24 times per minute. If I talk about exercising, it may go up to something around 50, 60 times per minute also. But that should come back to normal when you are resting again. But if a person is going through a severe disease, infection, then the breathing rate will be much lesser. That's the reason oxygen has to be given to them, no? Because the amount of oxygen that by normal breathing is not sufficient in their body at that time. So this is what you should generally understand. The first function already I mentioned. What is this first function that I keep blank here? Transferring messages, impulses from one cerebellar hemisphere to the other as the first function. And the second function is this, regulating the rate of breathing. Next is I talk about medulla. Now the function of medulla to remember, function of medulla oblongata. Now let me talk about the function of the third part, medulla oblongata. So when we are talking about the function of the medulla oblongata, the primary function of medulla oblongata is to regulate all the involuntary functions. To regulate all the involuntary functions. Can you name some 5 involuntary functions of our body? Breathing, heartbeat, and blinking. Yes, involuntary. And reflexes, okay. But when I talk about reflexes, majority of the reflexes are controlled by the spinal cord, not by the brain. Majority of the reflexes controlled by spinal cord. So when I talk about functions like breathing, when I talk about functions like beating of the heart, when I talk about functions like peristalsis, when I talk about functions like blinking, when I talk about functions like coughing, vomiting, peristalsis. So now all these would be considered as involuntary functions. But at the same time, swallowing at times can be considered, remember that's a bit contradictory. When we talk about swallowing, at times it is voluntary. Every time it cannot be considered as involuntary. Blinking, but you cannot hold it for a long time. Try blinking, you cannot hold it for a long time. Yeah? So when we are talking about swallowing, we can, because we can outflow also. No? We can outflow also. So these are the main parts of the brain and functions. Now, right, two differences between cerebrum Did I give you this? No, cerebrum and cerebellum. I gave you this. Okay. Next, ignore that. Come to the next question. Next question, cerebrum and cerebellum. You now know some of the differences. Number 2, the first question there you can write two differences between hypothalamus. Two differences between hypothalamus and medulla. Two differences between medulla and hypothalamus. Two differences between medulla and hypothalamus. First difference obviously will be you have to write about the part of the brain. Second difference you will write about their specific function. Only one function, one functional and one structural. That should be enough. No, location no need. It's a part of the forebrain. No, hypothalamus is actually a part of the forebrain. Thalamus is a part of diencephalon, and diencephalon is always a part of the forebrain. Of course, yes, in certain texts you will come across written as midbrain, but generally it is considered as a part of the forebrain. Medulla, a part of the hindbrain. Okay, function. Hypothalamus has many functions. We discussed 2, 3 already here, but you have to write about body temperature regulation. Thermostat. So first function, when you are differentiating, when you are asked also hypothalamus and medulla function in the bracket, you write hypothalamus regulates body temperature and medulla regulates involuntary functions. Okay. Now, next is, we move on. If you are done with this, then we move on to the next part. Now, after the brain, we now move on to the spinal cord. What is the spinal cord made up of, and what are some of the differences that you're going to talk about now. So when I talk about the brain and the spinal cord, let us learn some few differences. Already we have been talking about that the medulla of the cerebrum is made up of. Medulla of the cerebrum is made up of. Medulla of the cerebrum is made up of axons. And these axons, medulla of the cerebrum will be made up of axons. Now these axons will all bundle up and start moving away from the brain. But now that they bundle up and start moving away from the head region, in the skull, there is a small opening. What is the name of that opening? That name of that opening is, you had studied already that also, you had studied. The name of that opening is foramen Monroe. Do you remember that? Yes. Yes, we had studied. Huh? Foramen? Foramen magnum. No. So now, when we are talking about, there's a small opening in the skull, and through that small opening, the bundle of axon would come out. Now, this bundle of axon runs through the entire back region, right? Starting from the base of the head till the upper waist region, no? The entire region. And what is this entire rod of axon known as? This entire rod of axon is known as the spinal cord. So what is the spinal cord? If you are asked a 1 mark question, what is spinal cord? Define spinal cord. What are you supposed to write? It is an arrangement of axons, the bundle of axons is. From where to where does it run? From the base of the head till the waist region. Base of the head till the upper waist region. No. And what is the upper waist region known as? Base. No. Skeletal system, yaad karo. What is it called? What is it called? Cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral. Till the sacral. Coccygeal region mein spinal cord nahi hota hai. Till the sacral region. So now that we are talking about the spinal cord, the spinal cord also has got coverings. If I have to mention that, the spinal cord also has coverings. And if I have to talk about same like the brain, the spinal cord has got the bony covering. What is the bony covering of the spinal cord known as? The vertebral column. The vertebral column. Is the vertebral column bony? The vertebral column, if you still remember, the whole set of bones, small, are they a continuous long bone or a set of small bones arranged together? A set of small bones arranged together. So these small bones, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, right from the base of the head, they start arranging themselves, no? Till the sacral region. And now that we are talking about this whole set of bones, they generally are hollow. Every single bone is hollow, and through this hollow, the spinal cord runs. So if we look into the structure of the spinal cord, it should appear this way. When we are talking about the structure of the spinal cord, it should appear this way, where we are looking into the entire set of bones are there, and through this hollow, the spinal cord runs. Same like we can divide the entire vertebral column into 5 regions. So also the spinal cord can be divided into 5 regions. The neck region, cervical, chest region, thoracic, upper waist, lumbar, lower waist, sacral, and the tail region, coccyx or coccygeal. So that becomes a 5 region that we are talking about. Same as the vertebral column and the spinal cord, both. So what I said, if I have to talk about the bony covering, then I should also say that the bony covering is the vertebral column. Does the spinal cord has membranous covering? Does it have the membranous covering? Yes, same like the brain. Does it have the membranous covering? Same like the brain. And the arrangements are same like the brain. What were those 3 meninges we had studied? Dura mater, outermost, arachnoid, pia mater. So when we are talking about the spinal cord, here there's a difference. When we are talking about meninges are there, the meninges are there. Is there the cerebrospinal fluid in between? Yes. The cerebrospinal fluid is here also in between, performing the same function. We had already talked about some few functions, of the the cerebrospinal fluid. Are they performing a similar type of function here? Almost the same, almost the same. But here, when we talk about shock absorbing function, that becomes a major function so far the spinal cord is concerned. Shock absorbing function, providing nourishment, and all these things remains the same. Next is we talk about the spinal cord. Now see here, that's a major difference to learn when we are talking about the section of the spinal cord. And just now we were talking about the section of the brain. This is a major difference to remember. When I talk about the section of the spinal cord, the outer region of the spinal cord, also quite similarly known as the cortical region, the cortex and the medullary region. But here, in case of the brain, we were talking about the cortex was made up of gray matter and cytons. Here, this is just the reverse. It is just the opposite. Here, we are talking about the outer region made up of white matter, made up of axons, arrangement of axons. And this H-shaped structure that you get to see, this is the arrangement of the cytons forming actually the gray matter here. But if I now talk about the brain, again, there are a whole lot of sensory neurons entering, whole lot of motor neurons coming out. But if I talk about the spinal cord, okay, first of all, I'll show you this so you understand, and then we'll come to this figure. If I talk about that, this is the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord with all the meninges. Can you see this? Green and the white and the pink layer. These are the meninges. Okay. Take a note of these structures. Take a note of this structure that I want to show you. This spinal cord, a part of the spinal cord that I'm showing you, has got some neurons entering. Sensory. Do you remember the function of the sensory neurons? Sensory neurons का क्या function था दुर्गेश?
Stimulates from the center to
spinal cord. And from the spinal cord, the motor neurons come out, carrying commands for the effectors, carrying commands for the effectors. But generally, when I talk about the spinal cord and its surrounding, the sensory and the motor, they will have a common ending here. The sensory neurons I speak about. The sensory neurons, a whole lot of sensory neurons entering, a whole lot of motor neurons coming out, and they are bundling very close to the spinal cord, forming a nerve. Then what is the definition? What is the difference between the word neuron and the nerve? Neurons are fine fibers. And when a whole lot of neurons come together, forming a bundle, we say that's a nerve. So here, this is a nerve. Can I say this is a nerve? Can I say this is a sensory nerve? Can I say this is a motor nerve? So if I say this is the direction inwards and this is the direction outwards, I should say this is a motor nerve. This is a sensory nerve. Then what do we speak of this? The sensory and the motor is merging together, no? Mixed nerve. So क्या ऐसे वाला situation brain में भी होता है? No. Brain will have a separate nerve for sensory and a separate motor nerve. Brain के आसपास the sensory and the motor nerve will never merge and come out. Only surrounding the spinal cord, this particular feature we get to see, and this type of nerves are called what? Mixed nerves. Now let us talk about the section inside, how it is. Inside it would be something like this. A sensory neuron entering, a motor neuron coming out, and they are merging together, forming the mixed nerves. Okay. So now you know what are mixed nerves, how are they formed. Then when I talk about this difference, now if you are asked to write down two differences between the brain and the spinal cord, what are some of the major differences you are writing? You are writing differences based on the white matter and the gray matter. White matter and the gray matter. And what can be the other difference that you can write? There are a whole lot of differences, but two major differences always to understand. Second difference, what can you write? Functions. Functions also, if I talk about the spinal cord, does it regulate a whole lot of voluntary functions? Does it regulate a whole lot of voluntary functions? No, it does not regulate a whole lot of voluntary functions. Does it regulate a whole lot of involuntary functions? It does, but majorly what are you supposed to write? The reflexes. So try to understand what I'm telling you is, when I have to write down a major difference between the brain and the spinal cord, apart from the structural differences, if I have to write down a major difference about the functional difference, The brain, of course, regulates sensory. The spinal cord, of course, regulates voluntary also, involuntary functions also, but in coordination with the brain. But if I have to write down a major difference between the brain and the spinal cord, then I have to write what type of function the spinal cord on its own can regulate. On its own, it can regulate the reflexes. Voluntary function, yes, but with the help of the brain. Involuntary functions, yes, but with the help of the brain. Then if I have to write down brain, what type of function it can regulate? Voluntary functions, involuntary functions, sensory functions also, all on its own. And reflexes, can the brain regulate? Generally not. Reflexes, generally the spinal cord regulates. Let us write 3 differences between the brain and the spinal cord. What are 3 differences between the brain and the spinal cord? With these references, you will get many things, many other sort of questions like find the odd one out and all these things. If the concepts are clear, parts and functions clear, then you can easily answer all those questions. 3 functions, brain and spinal cord. Let me give the answer. Number 1, brain and spinal cord, 3 functions. First function, right, about the white matter, gray matter, right? I'll just give you the points you write. Brain, for the brain you are supposed to write. The gray matter is the outermost region consisting of cytons and white matter is the inner region consisting of electrons. So this is for the brain, right? Opposite for the spinal cord then. Right for the spinal cord. Done. First point. Second point you should write. Major differences between spinal cord and brain. Second point you write. For the brain you write. It has separate sensory nerves carrying messages and motor nerve carrying commands towards effectors. It has separate sensory nerves, neurons nerves carrying stimulus or messages from receptors and commands, and motor nerves carrying commands towards effectors. I'll repeat, it has separate sensory nerves carrying messages from receptors and motor nerves carrying commands for effectors. Okay, other side, what should you write for spinal cord? It has sensory nerves carrying messages and motor nerves carrying commands which merge to form mixed nerves. Carrying commands which merge or unite to form mixed nerves. Near the brain, there are no mixed nerves. Mixed nerves are always surrounding the spinal cord. Third difference, brain. Third difference, brain regulates voluntary functions, sensory and regulates voluntary function, sensory and regulates voluntary functions, sensory and involuntary functions. Full stop. For spinal cord, regulates voluntary functions in coordination with brain. Regulates voluntary functions with coordination or in coordination with the brain. In coordination with the brain and involuntary functions in response to a stimulus. Involuntary functions with response to a stimulus. इसको involuntary functions with response to a stimulus. If I have to write in 2 words, what should I write? Reflex action. Reflex. Is this point clear to you? The cerebrum can control a whole lot of motor functions, sensory functions on its own. The spinal cord can coordinate some of these voluntary functions also with reference to the brain. But can it carry out involuntary functions? Yes, only with reference to a stimulus. If I talk about this as an example, say suppose now that I talk about blinking regularly, now that we blink, is it an involuntary function? Yes, carried out by which part of our brain? Medulla. But can we consider blinking also as a reflex at times? When something falls on the eye, when there's an irritant in the eye.
And when there's a very
Bright light, okay, bright light also. So at this time, should we say that blinking is carried out by medulla?
no.
That is a reflex. That is carried out by spinal cord. Okay, so try to understand this differences. So now next is we are to talk about the time.
Yes.
Can you? Yeah, correct. I forgot that. That also please mention. Bony cover. Please remember that. Remember that also has a difference. Major structural and functional difference हमेशा याद रखना है. And there are similarities also between the arrangements of the bony cover of the brain is what? Skull.
And three membranes.
The arrangement of the meninges are the same, even in the spinal cord. So if you have to write a difference that way, the bony cover of the brain is skull, and the bony cover of the spinal cord is vertebral column. Meninges are a similarity. Meninges are the same. Now, next class, little bit on the differences about the types of nervous system and little bit of reflex. We are done with this chapter, and we move on to sensory organs. It's not very absent. There's not just three more lectures that we have to find out with the syllabus. And I want to finish up on time so that at least 1 or 2 lectures we have to practice 1 or 2 complete full paper. Okay. We are programming. And I remember that question today.